seen one of those Comedy Central roasts? There are these TV specials where a bunch of comedians get together and roast or make fun of some famous person. And that famous person has to sit there all night on stage in front of an audience and just take it. About a decade ago, in 2011, they held one of these roasts of Donald Trump. And the comedians that night, they were absolutely brutal. They made fun of Trump's hair, his face, his family, his sex life, his allegedly racist business practices. Nothing was off limits. There is not a single joke I can even repeat here because, of course, this is a family show. But there was one thing that the comedians that night were told they could not joke about. One thing that was absolutely off limits. Absolutely no jokes about Donald Trump not being as rich as he says he is. One of the writers for the roast said that was the red line for Trump. Quote, any joke that suggests Trump is not actually as wealthy as he claims to be. The comedian, Anthony Jeselnik, who roasted Trump that night, said, quote, Trump's one rule was don't say I have less money than I say I do. His kids were fair game. His wife was fair game. This, money, net worth, this is Trump's kryptonite. He once sued a reporter for daring to write that Trump was not, in fact, a billionaire. He pursued the case for years. But when Trump sat down for a deposition in that suit and the reporter's lawyers tried to pin him down on how much he was actually worth, Trump testified under oath, quote, my net worth fluctuates and it goes up and down with the markets and with attitudes and with feelings, even my own feelings. Feelings. Donald Trump lost that suit. Hard to believe, I know. But sometimes Donald Trump needs something to back up whatever his feelings are about his net worth. He needs a piece of paper to show a seller so he can buy some real estate, or to a lender to get a loan, or, to the American people so he can get elected president. That's when he turns to something called a statement of financial condition, prepared by his longtime accounting firm, Mazars. This he could hand to a potential lender or seller and say, see, here it is in black and white, prepared by my accountants. I, Donald Trump, am rich. So you can imagine just how Donald Trump felt this week when his longtime accounting firm, Mazars, announced they were quitting and that they were renouncing a decade's worth of statements of financial condition that they had prepared for Trump. Those statements, quote, according to Mazars, should no longer be relied upon. We have come to this conclusion based in part upon the filings made by the New York Attorney General. New York Attorney General Letitia James has been investigating Trump's business practices, in particular, whether he may have fraudulently misrepresented his assets to obtain loans and tax benefits. Trump's accounting firm looked at the evidence she has accumulated thus far and was like, oh, we are out of here. And Donald Trump's reaction to his accounting firm basically saying, we can no longer vouch for Trump being as rich as he says he is, well, it was about what you'd expect. Trump put out what may be the longest, most ranty statement he has ever released since leaving office. And the statement said, I'm paraphrasing here, I swear I'm really rich, even richer than you think. Far from inflating his net worth, Trump claimed that the Mazars statements actually undercounted how rich he is. Ultimately, of course, his statements ends up at Hillary Clinton and why she should probably be put to death. But remember, the main thing here, don't listen to anyone who says Donald Trump is not as rich as he says he is. That is the one thing prohibited, not allowed. And that was just the start of Donald Trump's week, which has really gone from bad to worse. Today, lawyers for Trump and two of his adult children, Don Jr. and Ivanka, appeared in court to argue to a judge why the Trumps should not have to comply with subpoenas from New York Attorney General Letitia James. It did not go well for them. For starters, the judge's clerk had to keep reprimanding Trump's lawyer for interrupting the judge, telling her, quote, counselor, when the judge speaks, you need to stop talking. The judge appeared unimpressed by Trump's lawyers repeatedly bringing up, who else? Hillary Clinton, and asking why Letitia James isn't investigating her. After that performance, it took the judge only a few hours to rule that, yes, Donald Trump Donald Trump Jr. and Ivanka Trump must comply with the subpoenas, which means that all three of them must sit for depositions with the New York Attorney General about the Trump Organization's business practices. And their testimony could potentially be shared with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, which is conducting a parallel criminal probe. Or they could all just plead the fifth, as Trump's other son, Eric, already did over 500 times when he testified to Letitia James's office. But one thing that is important to understand here is the snowballing nature of Trump's legal and financial predicament. Today's ruling compelling Trump and his children to testify is in part a result of Mazars, Trump's accounting firm. It's of Mazars abandoning him earlier this week. In his ruling today, the judge specifically quotes the Mazars letter renouncing all those Trump financial statements. The implication seems to be, yeah, this kind of sketchy thing is exactly why you need to go testify about your business practices. But you know what? Being compelled to testify to the New York Attorney General may not even be the worst thing that has happened to Donald Trump as a result of those dodgy financial statements. As you know, Donald Trump runs a hotel just down the street from the White House. He doesn't own the building itself, though. He leases the building from the federal government under a deal struck back in 2013 before he was president. Like many of his properties recently, the Trump Hotel in D.C. has been losing money. But unlike his other properties, Trump has actually found a lucrative way to get out of that D.C. hotel. He's reportedly found a buyer willing to buy the lease from him for a cool $375 million, which is well over the market rate. And Trump appears to really need that money. Like I said, his properties are losing money. He has hundreds of millions of dollars in debt coming due in the next few years. His primary bank, Deutsche Bank, has said they won't do any more business with him in the future. Oh, and did I mention his accountants just quit? But at least he's got that $375 million deal to sell that D.C. hotel, right? Right? Today, the House Oversight Committee wrote to the federal agency that manages Trump's lease on his hotel and said they should consider canceling the lease. Why? Because his accountants just announced that no one should rely on the financial statements they prepared for Trump, and their financial statements were what Trump submitted to the federal government to get the lease for his hotel. And submitting false financial statements to get the lease would breach the terms of the deal, meaning the government could terminate the lease. And if there's no lease, then Trump can't sell the lease, which means no $375 million. And as if that weren't bad enough news for Trump, the Oversight Committee says it has also obtained parts of Trump's agreement with Deutsche Bank for a $170 million loan to finance the construction of that D.C. hotel. And that loan agreement also relied on, take a guess, at least one of those financial statements from Mazars. And if Trump provided false financial information to Deutsche Bank in order to get that loan, well, in theory, Deutsche Bank could decide the deal is broken and call in repayment of that $170 million loan right now. That's how any normal loan would work anyway. In other words, thanks to this report from the House Oversight Committee today, not only could Donald Trump potentially lose his ability to sell his D.C. hotel for a handsome profit, he may be on the hook for a giant loan on that very same hotel much sooner than he planned.